Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Curt trailer wiring harness, and this is going to be a 4-pole on a 2019 Fiat 500. Now, this is going to give you your 4-pole, which is, when hooked up to a trailer, going to give you your lighting functions of running lights, your turn signals, as well as brake lights, keeping you safe and legal, and also letting the people behind you know what you're intending to do. Now, this wiring harness here we have living inside the vehicle, which means you're not going to see this when you're not towing, and it's going to keep it nice and clean and protected from the elements. And whenever you're done with it, you can just simply open up your hatch, coil this up, and put it in your storage compartment, and it's out of sight. Now, many trailer wiring harnesses will plug directly into the taillight, and this one's going to be a little bit different. You're going to be using some quick splices and tying in directly to the wires. It's not terribly hard to do, and I'll kind of break this down during the installation to make sure that you get yours installed. Overall, this should take maybe about an hour or so. The hardest part, I would say, is probably running the power wire up to the front of the vehicle. So just be prepared to kind of be underneath the vehicle for a little bit, and after that, you'll have your wiring harness ready to go, and you'll be able to pull some trailers. Now, when it comes to towing a trailer, you're going to want to always have trailer wiring, and that's going to give you the light functions that go to the trailer when you turn your turn signals on, your running lights, or your brake lights. And that's accomplished by having your 4-pole from the vehicle going to the trailer. But we are going to need to tie into the electrical circuits of the lights to get those signals. And while a lot of other cars out there will have plugs that you can just snap in, this car is not the most common towing vehicle, and that's where this one comes into play. We're going to be tying into the tail lights, and we also have another side for our right, our left, our 4-pole that attaches, and then a power wire that needs to run to the battery. So it seems like a big mess here, but we're going to get this installed. So the first thing we're going to want to do is gain access to our taillight wiring. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the hatch, and we'll start digging in. Now, the taillight wiring is easily accessible by pulling the taillight out, but we're going to have our 4-pole live inside the vehicle. That way, when we are ready to tow, you can kind of just drape it out. So it's going to keep everything a little bit more protected. And in order to get to that wiring, we're going to be taking off this portion on both sides, but we need to get this center garnish out first. So the scuff panel here comes out with, there's going to be 2 Phillips that are kind of tucked down in here. So we'll go ahead and get these loosened up. And then our scuff panel should just kind of pop out. A lot of times there's going to be clips along here, so I'm just going to kind of work my way from the bottom and just kind of pull straight up, and that allows us to slide this out. So now there's going to be a plastic clip here, and you can use a flathead screwdriver, but I'm using a trim panel tool, and I'm just going to kind of slowly pry this out. And this should allow us to kind of pull this carpeting back. You may want to lift this portion up just to kind of get some of this pulled out. It's tucked into the weather stripping, so you may have to kind of work at it a little bit. And yeah, it does seem like this is going to be a lot easier to get this portion taken out, just to kind of give us a little bit more space. And our taillight wiring is going to poke through here, through a grommet, and it's covered up by this insulation here. So we're going to want to peel this back to gain access to our wires. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Now I've peeled back our insulation, and we can see the wires that go into our brake light. So I'm going to go ahead and actually pull the other portion on our passenger side off before tying into any of the wires or testing them. That way we can just test them at the same time. So I'll go ahead and get the other side popped out and get this wire exposed. Now, there is a plastic pushpin on this side right tucked in here, so you're going to want to pop that off. And before we pull this out, we're going to also want to make sure that we get this cover off. And there's just 3 clips right here, and that just covers up your amplifier, but that's going to give us just a little bit more wiggle room in order to get to our wiring. So just make sure you're tracing from the grommet of where your taillight is, and you're grabbing the correct wire. And we'll go ahead, pull that out a little bit, and pull some of that insulation off to expose the wires. Now, I'm able to get my wire, but tying into it is going to be kind of tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and remove our amplifier, and it's just on a bracket here. It's going to be 10 millimeters, so we'll go ahead and get this removed. Now there's also going to be one more 10mm tucked back here, so we'll go ahead and get that one as well. And that definitely gives us a lot more access to be able to get to our wire. So now we are going to tie into our wiring, and I've gone ahead and tested the wires. They do come with a light tester in the box, and you can just simply turn your running lights on, your turn signals and brake lights, and find out what color in the pin that wire is, and then we're just going to splice into those accordingly. But I've gone ahead and done that, so I'll let you know which colors you can use on your Fiat. So we're going to start here by doing our left turn signal, and our left turn signal here is going to be our yellow. And the way the quick splice works here, this is how we're going to be tying into it. You can see there's a cap on one side, and this just kind of feeds in, and this is going to go around the wire that we're going to want to tie into, and then we're going to use a set of pliers to kind of crimp this down. That's going to bite in, making that metal contact, and then we can cap that up, and that'll be tied in. So for our left turn signal, we're going to be looking for the blue and gray wire. So with that blue and gray in the outside section there, I'm just gone ahead and pushed my yellow wire up. Just make sure that they are properly aligned before crimping down. You want to make sure it has a nice good splice here. So a set of channel locks always seems to be my go-to for this situation. So we'll, again, just make sure that wires are all in there. And then with my channel locks, I'm just going to go ahead, crimp this down. And then once that metal's bit down, you should be able to just cap this up, and that's one wire down. So I'm going to continue. So now we just have 3 wires left. This is just going to be our ground, which we can attach a little bit later. We're going to just finish up our quick splices on the driver's side. So our red and yellow is going to be our brake, and this is going to be tying into our green and white wire. And then our brown is going to be our running light, which is going to go to the yellow and red wire from the vehicle. So I'll get these quick spliced in real quick, and then we'll pick back up from there. So I've gone ahead and got those corresponding colors quick spliced in. So what we need to do is get our ground screw in, and this is just going to be a ring terminal here. You can see that it has a flat spot, so you're going to want that against raw metal here. I was looking for a factory ground that we can use, but unfortunately I'm not able to find one. So really any hollow part of the chassis that we can kind of drill into that's safe is going to work. So I can actually peel this back to give us a little bit more room, and I know this one is safe. I can feel behind it, there's nothing that's back there. So taking our self-tapping screw, I'm going to go ahead and get this drilled in. And if you need to put a pilot hole to make it a little bit easier, you can, but just get this mounted up. You're going to want it tight, but not too tight. You don't want to damage the wire here. So just kind of to where that ring terminal is not going to spin around on you. And that's good there. So the next thing we need to do before we mount up our module, we want to make sure that we have all of our wires kind of ran where they need to go. So I'm going to take our green wire, and this is going to pass underneath where this scuff panel is to go over to our other side to tie into our right turn signal. So I'll go ahead and just route this over, and if you want to, you can zip tie it on a few spots, but the clips are here, so really as long as it's below that scuff panel, it's going to be hidden, so not to worry too much there. So I'll pass this over, and we'll be tying into that right turn signal. Now our green wire is going to quick connect into our blue and black on the passenger side. So now that we have our wires attached there, we're going to go back to our module. And you can see it's stripped back here on the black portion. This is our power wire, and this is going to run up to the battery. So before we mount this up, just to make it a little bit easier, we have a little bit more room to work here. I'm going to go ahead and strip this back, and using the butt connector that's in the kit, we'll just attach this, and that way we can pass it down and make our way to the battery. Now we need to put our module in a spot that's not going to become loose over time, so I've used our double-sided adhesive and also the zip tie included in the kit to just kind of put it back in this corner, which is going to be a nice spot. It's nice and tight, and you just don't want this rattling around over time as you hit bumps and hearing that in the back. So just make sure it's nice and secure. Now we have all of our wiring tied in. We have our wire that we extended here. So this is really going to be the last portion, is running this up underneath the vehicle to the battery. Now the battery on this vehicle is going to be on the driver's side, so something to keep in mind when we run this up, and I'll show you the path that I took. But in order to get it to the bottom side of the car, you're going to see a rubber grommet here, and you can just poke a hole, you can drill a hole, whatever works best. And below that, there's going to be also an adhesive up on the bottom side that you're just going to want to poke through. Now if you have a spare tire, you're going to want to check that first, and you may need to lower that spare tire. But this is going to allow us to pass our power wire through. And I'm just going to pull this through the grommet to make it a little bit easier. And you want to leave just enough to where this can be all tucked back, nice and safe, but also not too terribly tight. If you need to, you can leave a little bit of extra wiring here. This is a pretty short wheelbase car, so we should have more than enough extra wire. But once passed through here, we're going to, again, run that power wire through that sticker, and then we'll hop underneath the vehicle. And I'm going to start routing this, and I'll show you the path that I took. So here you can see where we passed that power wire through, and just for a little extra precaution, we don't want water getting up in there, so I'm just going to use a little bit of black silicone here, and that's just going to fill that up and give us a watertight seal. Now, not completely necessary, but just a little added protection. Now, as far as the wire goes, I've ran this kind of over here, over the fuel tank, and that's going to kind of put us out, avoiding the exhaust. And that's the main thing, is we're trying to not hit any exhaust or suspension. And then I just kind of ran this over and tucked it in this tray. That's going to keep it nice and safe. And then our wire comes out here. Now I used a spare airline tube to pass this up to the battery. It's a pretty tight engine compartment, so you may need to find something to pass down to connect to that power wire to get it up there. And this is just going to route up. So I've just kind of attached this into our airline tube, and that way I can pull it from up top, pulling our wires up. Now we're also going to want to make sure we are avoiding, again, exhaust, but there are sway bars, and you have your steering and axles here. So just make sure that you're not making contact with those. And if you need to, you can put a few zip ties to keep that in place. So we'll head up, get our wire pulled through, and then finish up the rest of the wiring. So this is my airline tube that I ran down the back there, and I'm just going to pull this up, and that way we can get our power wire here. I'm just going to pull up all the excess. Again, if you need to, you can zip tie it to a few things just to make sure that it's not going to be loose in the engine bay, but just double check to make sure that it's not going to get in anything that could damage the wire. So now we have quite a bit of extra, and we're going to need to put our fuse holder in place. So I'll grab my tools and I'll show you how to do that. So I went and stripped our power wire back, and I went and put the butt connector here on our fuse holder. Now it's going to be important to not put the fuse in here. We don't want power going through until everything is completely hooked up. So just for preventative maintenance, we'll do that. And I'm going to go ahead and crimp this down. And then on this end of the fuse holder, we'll go ahead and put our ring terminal, and this is going to go to our positive battery terminal onto one of these bolts. So we'll need to grab a 10mm for that, but we'll go ahead and get this attached here. And with all of your splices or any of your butt connectors, you're going to want to just kind of give it a quick tug just to make sure that it is properly secured. You don't want to have to trace down a loose wire. So just a quick tug after each crimp is important, just to make sure that it's properly secured. So I've gone ahead and I've taken our 10mm nut off, and I just put our ring terminal in place, and now we're ready to put our fuse in to our fuse holder. So we'll just press that in, cap this up, and then we're going to go ahead and test to make sure that our wiring is working before putting all of our interior back. Now if you want to clean this up with some zip ties, by all means, go ahead and do that. Now before hitting the road, we're going to want to make sure to test our wiring to make sure that it's working properly. I'm using a 4-pole tester that we have here available at eTrailer. They're really nice. It keeps it specific to the vehicle. The other way that you're going to test is by hooking it up to the trailer and checking the light functions there. But if your trailer has faulty wiring, it can give you a false negative. So this is a nice way to do it. But either way, you're going to want to check before hitting the road. So I'm going to hop in the car and we'll run through the light sequence, make sure it's working. So starting out, I'm going to turn on my running lights. Next, I'm going to do my left turn signal, then my right turn signal, and then finally my brakes. So now we know that our wiring's working properly, so we can go ahead and get all of our interior panels put back in. And as far as the 4-pole, this is going to live inside the vehicle, so you can really just coil this up and tuck it underneath in that storage compartment until you're ready to use it. Now when you are ready to hook up to your trailer, you're going to simply just drape it over the weather stripping, and you're going to be able to close your hatch on it. It's not going to cause any issues. It has just enough protection with that weather stripping to not pinch the wires, and then you'll have your trailer wiring ready to go. So once you get all your interior back together, you're good to go. And that was a look and installation of the Curt trailer wiring harness on a 2019 Fiat 500.